Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly Sunday school lesson. I am Elder Latanya Milliken of the All Nations Church in Oakland, California, where my pastor is Bishop Terrence L. Milliken. His wife is Lady Regina Blake Milliken, and this is, oh my God, a brand new quarter, the fall quarter. We are sharing the Sunday school lesson for the adult class, and I'm so happy you could join me once again. We've been on this journey together. It's been an amazing journey, and as we begin the new quarter, I can see how all of the old lessons that we learned are beginning to tie in, and we're learning quite a bit. And so thank you for joining. Before we get started, I want to say happy birthday to my brother-in-law. Happy birthday, Jerry, in San Antonio, Texas. God bless you. We love you. Enjoy your birthday. And so I'm videotaping today. This is the Labor Day weekend, and the date of this lesson for you to enjoy whenever you're ready is September this is lesson September the 5th lesson. The September the 5th lesson, and the subject of our lesson is the ordination of Aaron and his sons. And we're highlighting the book of Leviticus. And I'll just give you a brief overview of what this quarter is going to look like, and then we'll get into our lesson. So this week, this quarter, we began studies in the book of Leviticus and Numbers. And these lessons will focus on the importance of living out our faith, especially in difficult times. It will help us build our faith so that when we're tested, we will be found faithful. So Leviticus and Numbers are beginnings. And so let me just kind of give you just historical where we are. So the first 5 books of the Bible is called the Pentateuch, and it is primarily the historical background on the beginning. So when we think about the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Numbers. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Yes. Okay. So when you think about beginnings, the first 3 chapters of Genesis is primarily the beginning of creation. We are created beings. God created us. And so it depicts the beginning of humanity and creation. And then from Genesis to 12th chapter, it begins to share with us the beginning of the Israel nation, and through the patriarch Abraham. And we've talked about Abraham in some of our lessons. And then from there, we pick up in Exodus, the first through, I believe it is, so Exodus, the 1st to the 14th, then shows us and carries us through how the children of Israel, gives us the beginning of the nation of Israel. And we've talked about that, the nation of Israel, while the remaining of Exodus records the beginning of Israel's journey from Canaan from Egypt to Canaan, journey to Canaan. And so we've learned, we've talked about these books, we've talked about these stories, and so they will all tie in. All right. And then the book of Leviticus. So Leviticus continues to share with us beginnings. We start to develop this greater detail and meaning of this relationship with the Creator. Such a relationship demands God's people to deeply understand the concept of true holiness. And so this quarter we will be in Leviticus, right? And Numbers. And so our lesson today introduces us to priests and the priesthood. And so there was, when God created man, humanity, and we were born with our own will, and in our own will we sinned, and so there was a problem. The problem was that humans who were sinful And God, who was holy, sinful humans could not approach a holy God. And so they needed a representative. And so God's answer to this problem in the Old Testament was the priesthood. Now today, Jesus is our high priest. And so we go to God through Jesus. And we are saved through Jesus Christ. But before Jesus Christ, we have the priesthood. And the priest would perform the sin sacrifices and the worship. And so in our lesson today, we learned the ordination of the first priest. So the first high priest is Aaron, which is Moses' brother. And he was chosen by God. Moses had nothing to do with it, but Moses was the mediator at that time. And God spoke to Moses and gave him instructions. He told him who was going to be the high priest, Aaron and his sons. And in order to be a priest going forward, you had to be a descendant of Aaron's. And the requirement was they had to be washed, clothed, and well, not the requirement or the process, I'm sorry, of the ordination is that the priests had to be washed, they had to be clothed, and they had to be anointed. And God wanted this to happen in a public place because he wanted his people to see who he had chosen to be the high priest and for them to understand the priesthood. These men were going to be set aside for a service to the Lord, and they were to be respected. So let's talk about real quickly the washing. And so the washing would signify that Aaron and his sons were not holier than thou. They were sinful as well. And so they had to be washed. Their sins had to be washed away. And they could not wash their own sins away. Someone had to wash them, do the washing. So Moses, as a mediator, did the washing in front of the people and washed them. You know, now, I can't tell you what happened then, but I've been watching a lot of old movies like the 1800s, and they had slaves and who would wash them, but they would have this thin gown. They would get into the tub, but they would have this thin gown on them, and then they would kind of like wash them, you know, on top of that, which was not what we do today, but so there was this washing, and the washing, Moses did the washing. So after the washing, then he clothed them. And I want to go into detail on how the high priest garment looked. Oh my God, I'm a lover of fashion. In fact, I love movies that just slam when it comes to wardrobe. I mean, you know, I love beautiful wardrobe, elaborate wardrobes of different decades. I enjoy that. So this particular high priest garment, and it's important to note this because God spared no expense. He spared no expense down to the detail because he wants us to understand that he cares about us and he cares about the details in our lives. So real quickly, this garment, the high priest garment. Now, the priests wore all white, a garment similar to the high priest, but they wore all white. It was nothing like what the high priest wore. So the high priest, let me just take my time. Okay. The high priest had first what was called a coat. And the coat was like a garment that fell all the way to the floor. And then there was this girdle, but it's not really it's a girdle, but it was more like a belt that they tied around the coat to pull the actual coat to the body. On top of the coat was a robe. And the robe was made of blue, purple, and scarlet material. And at the bottom of the robe were golden bells on the hem. on top of the robe was what is called an ephod. And an ephod looks more like an apron. And the ephod was made of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet thread. So, I love embroidery. Like, I love dresses and coats and things that have embroidery. That's really nice embroidery. And so that just really hit my tingles, right? So all of this thread woven, and I could imagine that it was just so beautiful in the ephod. And then on the shoulders of the ephod, so you're looking like over the robe was this apron, like a long apron, and then on the shoulders were 2 onyx stones, and engraved in the stones were the 6 names of the tribes and the other 6 names of the tribes on the stones, and they were attached to the ephod. Now, then there was what is called the curious girdle, and it was more like it was made of the same material as the ephod, and it was like a belt that pulled the ephod close to the body. Then there was the breastplate. The breastplate was a square plate of woven material, and it rested in front of the ephod, in front of the apron, and it had 12 precious stones on them, and engraved in the precious stones was each a name of the 12 tribes. So the 12 tribes of Israel's names were on the breastplate, and names were on the ephod. What do you think about that? How do we I'm gonna leave that out anyway. So when I think about this, I'll talk about when I think about how the precious stones, the onyx, their names on there, I just see how detailed it is, how much detail was put into this, how God was sending the message, how precious the people were to him, the 12 tribes, and the process, and his willingness and his desire to have this relationship with them. What are your thoughts? What do you think as you hear about this garment that was made? So we have the breastplate with the 12 precious stones. Each tribe is engraved in the stones. Now, do you know the 12 tribes of Israel? I'm not going to give them to you. But anyway, then on top of that, there were 2 other stones. The Urim and the Thummim. They were like dice-like stones. Oh yeah, I am. Look at me, like I'm okay. So there were dice-like stones, and they went inside. They were stored inside the breastplate, and they were used at times to determine, like they would throw the dice to determine the will of God. Well, we don't need that today. Today we have the Holy Spirit that will lead us and guide us and share with us the will of God. Now, we're not done yet. Then there was the mitre, or the turban that went on the head, which was like a crown, and in front of it was a plate of solid gold, and on it was written, "Holiness to the Lord." And this is so elaborate. It's so beautiful. But the Lord wants us to know that we are, how precious we are to him, and how intricate he plans things, and he's so strategic in what he does for us. And when you think about these garments, do they remind you of an organization or a religion that they still wear robes? And these, oh my God, listen, it reminded me of the time I had the honor of speaking at the ordination of Bishop Richard Taylor, Pastor Richard Taylor. He was being promoted to bishop, and he invited me to speak to the College of Bishops. And oh my goodness, that process, that ceremony, it was private, but it was so beautiful. Oh my God, it does something to you to see the ordination process. You know, if you ever invited, don't discount it. Go and see what it's like. Feel what it's like to see men of God being promoted, because it's so beautiful. And I had never seen it before, and it was similar. So he got the outer garment, he got this, and he got an apron and a staff. All of these things had significance, and the president of the Bishop University was sharing with us what all of this meant, like I'm sharing with you today. It was just beautiful. And so I want to give you a couple of things before we wrap this lesson up, as I share with you the ordination. So after he clothed them, then he anointed them. He anointed Aaron, and he anointed the high priest. And so there are 3 requirements of biblical holiness that can be clearly discerned in Leviticus in our lesson. We don't want to miss these points. There are 3 things, right? 1, a thorough understanding that which God requires. A thorough understanding of that which God requires. You have to understand what God requires. 2, a clear determination to give God glory. 3, complete obedience in following God's instructions. So we must follow his instructions. Now, let me give you the actual fact of the lesson as we wrap it up. Today's aim in our Sunday school lesson is to observe the 3 very important aspects of God's holiness. I'll say them again. We must understand what God requires. That's a part of holiness. We must be determined to give God the glory and reverence him. That's 2. And we must be in complete obedience in following God's instructions. The principle of our lesson today is to emphasize that God's children are to reflect the holiness of their Heavenly Father. God is holy, and he is calling us to be holy, to represent him. Lastly, the application of our lesson is to investigate our personal lives with a goal of becoming more consistent in our personal holiness. So what are you doing? What are you doing today to be more holy? Let's wrap this up. In the conclusion, Leviticus 8:1-13 communicates a number of very important concepts related to biblical sanctification or growth in holiness. We have seen that biblical holiness requires a thorough understanding of God's, here we get it again, a thorough understanding of God's requirements, the right motives on the part of the believer, and complete obedience in following God's instructions. God gave Moses instructions, and Moses followed them. That is our lesson today, and I hope you learned something from our lesson. Next week, the central theme will be also on God's holiness. We will be talking more about God's holiness, but it's very different. It's a very different feel. It'll let us know what happens when we don't follow God's instructions and consider him holy. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. I've enjoyed sharing it with you. Until next week, enjoy your weekend and enjoy your week. I love you. Bye-bye.